9/11 and October 7th? How do they fit?
Well, I mean, after 9/11, I bleached my hair, so I had frosted tips for 2 years, and that helped me get through the airport a little bit quicker. I will say that.
Watching people disconnect from reality in a way that I'd never expected them to do. They started fearing Hamas as if Hamas had dug tunnels to Brentwood.
I've never had any difficulty making jokes on any subject because, again, I make math jokes. If you can do math jokes, you can make anything extremely painful funny.
And yet you have Benjamin Netanyahu pops up in the middle with little video ads where he tells people how much he loves them before he bombs the shit out of them. And he's done this with Gaza. He's done it with Lebanon. He's now doing it with Iran.
It's like, it's almost rude at this point because not only are you destroying people's lives, but you don't even have the courtesy to write new copy. Just get a writer's room.
I think, if anything, that's what Netanyahu is. He's the person who speaks in a way that dumb Americans can think he's on the right side.
I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Matt Lieb.
And I'm Sammy Obeid.
And we're not kidding. A podcast from Zeteo where funny people talk about serious things. Thank you both, Matt and Sammy, for coming on the show. Sammy, this is your second time on the show. Last time you were in the studio with me in DC. This time you're in California. You're traveling. You're on tour. What's going on with you, Sammy?
Oh, same old. I'm just touring around the world trying to find people to heckle me for better content.
Around the world. We've got a clip of someone heckling you, which we're going to play later in the show. Don't you worry, Sammy. And I believe you and Matt are both calling in from California. Matt, welcome to the show. I believe, and I only discovered this very recently, that you're married to Francesca Fiorentini.
That's right. That's my wife, Francesca Fiorentini. Who
and I wanted her to come on this show, and you've come on first. So can you please not mention to her that you were on this show? Can we keep it?
Yeah, no, I've been keeping this a secret for a few weeks now. I've just been, I'm doing something with Sammy Obeid.
Let's just not let her find out yet till we get her on the show soon. But I appreciate you both coming on, guys. No one's going to know about it apart from the internet. Look, this is a show about serious topics with fun folks. Today's the most serious topic of all. Since We're Not Kidding launch, we've been covering what's been happening in Gaza, the killing, the violence. A lot of our shows have been dedicated to that. It's now been 1 year since October the 7th. We have had the anniversary of that horrific Hamas surprise attack on Israel, an anniversary of 1 year of the war and the genocide since. We thought for today's conversation, my team and I, let us do something a little bit different and get some different perspectives from players, if I can use that phrase. So we have you, Matt, if I can call you a Jewish American comedian.
You can call
Sammy,
me a player.
Palestinian-American. Yeah. Sammy, the Palestinian-American comedian, to talk about what this past year has been like for both of you, both professionally and personally, given your background. And I just want to start our chat today, a year into this, with a very simple question in a couple of words. If both of you can just tell me, because I'm fascinated, a year in, what emotion are you feeling right now?
Perpetual insanity. You said two words.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel it. Sammy?
Insane perpetuity, I think, is what I would say.
Yep.
Okay. The mathematician with the reverse of that answer. So I appreciate, look, I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening will be feeling exactly the same way. Let me start with one obvious question for a show that's looking back on a year since October the 7th. And we used to do this when we talked about 9/11, and before our generation, it was JFK. Where were you on the day? What do you remember of that day that has sadly changed our world for the worst in so many ways?
Yeah, well, given the time difference, because I believe it happened, between 5, 6 a.m. local in Israel, I was actually on stage in New Jersey. I was on stage in New Jersey performing for some people who didn't know who I was. It was a small theater show. Don't want to say ironically bombing, but I was. And I remember getting off stage and just feeling very weird and going back to my hotel room just very depressed. And then I woke up the next morning to the headlines and I was like, that explains it. It wasn't me,
You bombed in the other Jewish state, New Jersey.
Matt, where were you? What do you remember about that day?
Funnily enough, I was celebrating my daughter's birthday. October 7th is her birthday. So technically,
lucky her.
I threw a party on October 7th. but it was for my daughter's birthday, and everything, I heard about what was happening in the middle of the night. I started seeing on Twitter people like Michael Rappaport just screaming Israel on Twitter, and I said, "Uh-oh, something's happening."
When does he not scream, that guy?
Yeah, no, that's kind of just what he's been doing for a while now. He never kind of stopped after that. And yeah, we had a very strange birthday party because as the details started coming out about how coordinated and massive this attack was, I realized now my daughter's birthday is going to be the 7th forever. So that's a lot of fun.
You
for
just
her.
come up with a different day. How old is your daughter?
She's turned 2. She just turned 2.
She'll never know, Matt. Just give her a different birthday.
Yeah,
and move on.
We'll go with the 6th.
She'll
My
have
wife's
no clue.
birthday is September 10th, so you
No,
know. It's,
okay,
yep,
there you
it
go. Then it could
runs
just
in
be
the
a
family.
part. Yeah, we have a day before major. I mean, look, you mentioned September 10th. From the very get-go, for obviously cynical reasons, Netanyahu, supporters of Israel, said this is our 9/11.
Yep.
And in a way, they're right. It is a huge terrorist attack for them. Killed a lot of people. Record number of Israelis. Obviously, the fallout has been similar to 9/11 in the sense of like open-ended, endless war, creating more terrorists than you kill, et cetera, et cetera. And Spencer Ackerman's written a great piece for us for Zeteo, this marking the anniversary on how all the bad lessons from 9/11 were absorbed in the wake of October the 7th. But I'm just wondering, in terms of kind of a consequential day, 9/11, the day that changed the world, October 7th, where does it rank in terms of changing the days? It was the day itself, horrifically violent. The brutal stories that come out of that day are truly heartbreaking and will be remembered for a long time and have been mocked in the media on this anniversary for obvious reasons. And we still have hostages inside of Israel, inside of Gaza, who were taken on that day. But in terms of the fallout, we have this genocide in Gaza that comes off the back of it for the last 12 months. We now have a regional war that we're in the middle of. The fallout in the US, campus protests that Sammy and I talked about last time he was on the show. Matt, I just wonder what you think as a consequential moment in history this is for us.
I think it's we're only just seeing the beginnings of how consequential it is. This, I think, early on was billed. I mean, maybe by the 8th, it was started being billed as the 9/11 of Israel. And I remember people, scoffing at that idea. But in terms of the amount of chaos that it's created in the Middle East, and we're just seeing the beginnings of it. I mean, we just saw this, ballistic missile attack by Iran. And to me, this is just the beginning. The destabilization of the Middle East. I just don't see it being over. Unless by the time this podcast comes out, a lot has changed. I only see it getting worse. I'm sorry. I wish I could say that in a funny way.
I'm with you on that. And Sammy, I just wonder, kind of sticking with this just as we go forward, the 9/11, October 7th, the comparison, you're obviously of American Muslim heritage, Palestinian-American heritage. It's like a double whammy. You got 9/11 and October 7th. You've endured both. How do they figure in your life when you look at your life as an American? 9/11 and October 7th, how do they fit?
Well, I mean, after 9/11, I bleached my hair, so I had frosted tips for 2 years, and that helped me get through the airport a little bit quicker. I will say that. But to kind of shift it a little bit, actually, I saw this a lot reminded me of the pandemic in the sense that, I don't know if you felt the same way when the pandemic started. A lot of us were like, oh, this is going to be over in a couple weeks. I mean, this is bad. This is catastrophic, but this is going to be over in a few weeks. And then it kept going and going and going. And like a year later, it felt like we were still deep in a pandemic. So to me, it's giving me pandemic vibes.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine had his 40th birthday coming up and the pandemic came along. We had a guy's trip planned and he just didn't want to cancel it. He kept postponing it one more month. I'm like, it's a worldwide pandemic. This party, this trip is not happening, my friend.
Yeah, I'm friends with Gavin Newsom too. Yeah.
So, Matt, let's talk about I asked, Sammy talks about 9/11, Islamophobia, airport security gags. We all been there, 20 years of, still the case. When you go to an airport, you still get the same shit. Yeah. For you as a Jewish American and part of a Jewish American community, I remember people saying to me on like 9th, 10th of October, well before any campus protests or any of that, Jewish friends of mine saying, this is the worst it's ever been. Obviously, it was classed as the I think the single deadliest attack since the Holocaust is how it's been described by many people, October 7th itself. But you had Jewish Americans sitting in the United States saying, we feel threatened. We feel unsafe. I had a Jewish friend of mine tell me, I remember, everyone hates us. But of course, you did see spikes in anti-Semitism. You have seen people then, in my view, weaponize anti-Semitism to protect Israel since in places like college campuses. But the fear is genuine, right? I don't think, and you can tell me, I have a lot of Jewish friends who are genuinely fearful. I don't think they're making it up.
No, they're not. They're not making it up.
So what does it feel like after October 7th to see what happened to Jewish Israelis and to see the fallout globally? Because a lot of Jewish communities felt that the entire Jewish global community had been attacked on that day.
I do feel like people, for a while there, I watched the reaction, especially among Jewish Americans, and I felt like I was watching people disconnect from reality in a way that I'd never expected them to do. They started fearing Hamas as if Hamas had dug tunnels to Brentwood in order to kidnap only the most successful comedian friends I have. It was very strange because I couldn't believe how disconnected they were from. By the time people were telling me, I'm really scared, friends texting me like, be careful, the International Day of Jihad is tomorrow. Oh, yeah. And I was like, what do I wear? I didn't pack for that.
Which was the kind of bullshit that led to the killing of little Wadid.
That's right.
In Chicago.
That's right. So at this point, it was a couple weeks past the 7th, and already there were thousands dead, thousands in Gaza. And I just couldn't believe that so many people I knew who were like, previously smart, progressive, liberal, just what I would consider regular people, were all of a sudden, they just decided that their needs, their fears were the priority. And anyone that was, not taking their fears seriously was, possibly an anti-Semite or an enemy. And it was very strange for me because for a while there, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Then I realized they're not faking it. They are actually scared, but the reasons behind that fear have less to do with Hamas and, October 7th and more to do with just kind of growing up, being taught that Arabs and Palestinians especially are worse than Nazis, that they hate you and they want to see you dead. And I think we were all just kind of, or at least a lot of us were activated from October 7th. And we just went, all of my suspicions are confirmed. They hate Jews more than they love life. And we just need to let Israel do what it needs to do.
The Nazi thing is interesting because Douglas Murray, the right-wing pundit who's not Jewish, wrote for the Jewish Chronicle, I think it was late last year or early this year. He wrote a piece where he suggested that Hamas were worse than the Nazis because the Nazis at least got blind drunk. They felt bad about what they were doing. Whereas Hamas broadcast it and they were proud of what they were doing. And a lot of historians obviously said that's a lot of bullshit. Stop doing what sounds like Nazi apologia. Interestingly, Sammy, after October 7th, you did an Instagram live conversation with the Israeli comedian Noam Schuster Eliassi, who's also been very critical of the Israeli government and its actions in Gaza.
In Gaza, the death toll there's no way to know right now.
Right.
It's mounting up. It's above 1,000 people already.
People are saying close to 2,000 and 5,000 injured.
It's horrific. It's just unspeakable. It will lead us to more disaster. It's just insane.
What made you want to have that conversation? I think it was October the 12th, less than a week after October 7th. You as a Palestinian-American, what made you feel the need to have this conversation in public about what's going on with a fellow comedian who's Israeli?
As somebody who's been following this for years, the situation, with Israel and Palestine, I realized early on there's always going to be a lot of misinformation and misleading by the media. And so as soon as a lot of the news was coming out that week, it was very hard to sift through right away. We were already hearing things about 40 beheaded babies and stories of sexual assault and I heard some things that like, oh, that sounds like it could be true, and some things like that sounds like really far-fetched. So I really just wanted to know what was going on. And my friend Noem, she lives in Israel. She's an activist. I trust her very much. She's very honest, and she's very critical of the Israeli regime. So I knew that she would have the inside scoop. And at the same time, she also knew friends who were either killed or missing from the October 7th attack. And so not only was I going to get an unbiased answer from her, but I was also going to hear the side of the suffering of people there, because at that week was just very confusing in general, because everybody was just clamoring and just very loud without actually going through the information of what happened and mourning the actual losses, and instead of amplifying these fake stories. So I just felt like it was going to help out all of us, and I broadcasted it. I wanted to do an Instagram live so that everybody could hear kind of a clear-cut answer on what was happening. I also wanted to add that I do remember the International Day of Jihad, and me and my family were terrified because my uncle's name is Jihad, and we didn't want to do his birthday again.
I always wonder about people who are called jihad. What do they do at airports and post offices?
It's a struggle.
It's a nightmare.
It's a struggle, yeah. Which is what jihad means.
Oh, yeah. What do their family members do? Jihad, slow down. The plane will wait for us.
Yeah.
I still want to be. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Right.
You guys are comedians. You use comedy to talk about all sorts of serious issues: politics, geopolitics, pandemics in which people died. Obviously, Israel, especially post-October 7th, is a very sensitive issue for comedy, especially for a brown man like Sammy, who can easily get accused of anti-Semitism. Matt, as a non-brown man who is harder to be accused of anti-Semitism, though I'm sure people try, how did you decide to approach... Actually, no, rather than ask that question, I'm actually going to say, you did post a great video. We've got it, a video on Instagram from October of last year titled How to Correctly Criticize Israel, in which you satirize the idea that no one's really allowed to criticize Israel. Let's play a clip.
I'm seeing a lot of people on the so-called left criticizing Israel while falling into the same anti-Semitic tropes that I've seen time and time again. So I, an American Jew, am going to tell you how to correctly criticize Israel without being accused of anti-Semitism. Don't go throwing around the word apartheid state. Apartheid only ever happened in South Africa, and you can't use that word again. You can't just keep using words. Call it something that is correct, like a kerfuffle. Just be like, oh, that's all right, kerfuffle, they go there. Do not mention the Palestinians or the occupation, okay? If you want to talk about problems in Israel, talk about how there's a lot of stray cats and how the traffic's really bad. Do not throw around the word genocide. You guys just throw it around like it's just nothing.
I hope I helped a lot of people with that video.
I think you did. And I think we should all call it the big kerfuffle in the Middle East. What was the reaction you got to that video? So again, so soon after October the 7th.
The reaction initially was interesting because a lot of people did not understand that it was satire. Because it was way too close to what people were actually saying.
Yes. Beyond parody is a phrase I use often.
Yeah, and so I had to do a lot of explaining to people, did you not hear the part where I said kerfuffle? This is clearly a joke, but one thing you learn very quickly on social media is how hard it is to do satire, especially when it's a subject matter that's beyond satire like this.
I mean, serious question, Matt. You are Jewish. You were raised Jewish from a Jewish family.
I was a secular. Jewish, culturally and ethnically.
Yes.
So
a lot of people, the Ben Shapiro's as well, say you're not a real Jew. Right. You're just culturally Jewish. You don't. Right. You don't do all the practice. What happens to that line of attack after October the 7th? Because you had people like Avi Meir in the Jerusalem Post writing a piece saying "no longer a part of us," in which he said, any anti-Zionist Jews, any Jews who don't fully support Israel right now, after this moment of trauma for us, they should be excluded from the Jewish family, the Jewish community.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that's a great strategy. It is very clear where that's coming from. That's coming from a place of being able to claim that every Jew is a Zionist, because if you are not a Zionist and you're Jewish, then you are no longer a Jew. So it's a way of weeding out anyone who is, critical of Israel. And it's a way to continue to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Because if every single Jew is a Zionist, then you can more easily claim that criticism of Israel's criticism of Judaism.
What's so absurd, Matt, is I did a debate on this very topic in Canada for the Monk debate a few months ago with Douglas Murray for My Sins. And Douglas, who is not Jewish, was standing on stage getting huge applause from Jewish people in the crowd as he basically said people like you are not real Jews, which I thought, what a point we've reached to now, where Zionist non-Jews are judging the Judaism of anti-Zionist Jews.
I mean, that's the logical endpoint of Zionism, because when you decide to, have an ideology that is based on essentially nationalism, right, and have that replace something that is a religion, then, you can have anyone criticizing Jews because they're a Zionist. Therefore, a Christian Zionist is more Jewish than the son or daughter of a rabbi who is critical of Israel. It's completely absurd, and it only serves to sever. It serves to get Jews in line and sever them from their families. It's essentially, Zionism is cultish. It shares all the same traits as a cult, and, instilling fear, in millions of Jews. I don't see how that's not an act of anti-Semitism to tell them, you either fall in line or we're going to separate you from your family.
But Matt, you haven't fallen in line. You do a weekly podcast with a fellow Jewish host, Daniel Marte, called
That's
Bad
right.
Hasbara. Where did that come from? Was that you just trying to fill a gap the way people are not saying what needed to be said?
Yeah, that was at that point it was December, and enough insanity had happened that I just I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore. I after a while the satirical videos stopped giving me that feeling of, this is going to change things. And I said, no, I just need to be genuine and start talking about this and start making fun of the propaganda. All of this propaganda that I've seen, and with people that you've debated with, like Elon Levy, these characters are absurd. All of these characters are absurd. The president of Israel, and then there's Netanyahu himself.
But they're not the subject of late night humor like any other government ministers would be in this situation.
Yes, they're all way funnier than Trump. Not in terms of their actions, but in terms of their PR spin. Just it's like completely unbelievable, things that they say that no one questions. And I just was like, this is too funny not to make fun of. And if, Colbert's not going to do it, then I'm going to do it. And I started doing a podcast about it.
Thankfully, Jon Stewart is doing it, and he's been doing a very good job. Great to have him back on air post October 7th. Sammy, in terms of the feedback that you've gotten since October 7th, you and I touched on this the last time you were on the show, but you mentioned at the start of the show, hecklers. Have you had to, you use a lot of Palestine material, Gaza material in your comedy. Have you had a lot of hecklers?
Surprisingly, not as many as I would like, because nowadays I'm doing my own shows, so people who come to see me, they know what I talk about. They're all there to be supportive. So really, the only time I get hecklers is if I drop in on a show that doesn't know who I am, which has happened a few times, or somebody brings a friend to the show and they don't know their friend's politics very well before they come to the show, or they do, and it creates for a fun surprise. So I've had a few of those situations.
You had a moment recently where I watched the stand-up clip go viral. I laughed my head off because I know you and I've spoken to you before. You used your superpower as a former math teacher, and I know you love your math, to debunk the claims of a heckler in the audience who said, well, the Palestinians in Gaza all voted for Hamas. Let's play that clip.
Israel left Gaza. The Palestinians voted for Hamas.
Let's unpack that statement. They voted for Hamas. All of them, even the babies, crawled out to the polls, scribbled in Hamas. got the little green lollipop and went home. Half of Gaza's population is under 18. Okay? So, yes, this is partially true. Also because refugees have been pushed out from other parts of the region into Gaza. That's why there's a lot of people there. But yes, the Gaza birth rate is high. Some people often say it's only one or the other. It's actually both. Palestinians be doing it. So half of the population is under 18. We already know that less than 50% of them voted. Because it was one election, and it was in 2006. Do you remember who you voted for in 2006? No, because it was a midterm year. Nobody gives a right? Nobody remembers who was on the ballot in 2006. Let's unpack this trope even more. If you look at the statistics, half of the population isn't even of voting age now, meaning like 75% of the population wasn't even voting age then. 40% of the people who showed up to vote that day voted for Hamas. Let's say 80% of the voting population showed up. So that's 20% of the total population now. And 40%, what's 40% of 20%? Come on, you may not be on the side. You gotta be on the side of math. It's 8%. At most, 8% of the people living in Gaza voted for Hamas. So do you understand how up it is to say they voted for Hamas when literally it was just 8% who voted for Hamas? Right? Let's think about that. Where are you from, by the way?
San Diego.
I gotta ask, Sammy. I know you're good at arithmetic. Was that something you had pre-prepared, or did you do it on the spot?
So that math part that we just saw, that was actually all on the spot. Math I can do on the spot. Jokes I have to spend months writing. So there's another part of that video where I compare everything to the 2004 election, and that was a whole constructed bit that I was able to just bust out right there. But yeah, the math, that was all spontaneous, no calculator.
But in terms of kind of the positive responses you've gotten, obviously doing comedy, again, in the wake of a very tragic day, October the 7th, about a very tragic situation in Gaza, a genocide. How does that work, Sammy?
On my end, I've never had any difficulty making jokes on any subject because, again, I make math jokes. If you can do math jokes, you can make anything extremely painful funny. In terms of the feedback, I kind of judge what it's doing based on the feedback I've received. So a couple good feedback, like, for instance, I will get messages from people saying, I knew nothing about this topic until I saw your stand-up, and it made me look into it more, and I'm now glad that I found your stand-up because now I know a lot about the situation. It's really bad. We need to stop it. Something like that. I've also heard, oh, me and my family, we see things differently politically, and your jokes are a great way to open up discussion, so I often send them a joke if I want to have a discussion about something. I've also had people reach out to me like, hey, I'm Jewish. I grew up Jewish. I was formerly Zionist or, raised to be Zionist. And once I started seeing your clips, I started to look into it more. And now I see things differently. And then, of course, people who are very pro-Palestine and go to a lot of rallies and are active, they say, oh, thank you for making me laugh. It's just been a really hard year. I've been so depressed.
Yeah. Well, your clips have certainly gone viral and we've enjoyed them and we've appreciated them for sure. Matt, there was a clip that I want to play of yours last year where you talked about it was a satire of liberal Zionists.
Liberal Zionist, yeah.
Let's play that clip.
So I'm a liberal Zionist, and I have to say that I actually do agree with a lot of what the pro-Palestinian left has to say about Israel. The occupation is awful and it needs to end. The 17-year siege of Gaza has been brutal and it is completely unconscionable. I agree that Israel is essentially, in parts of it, an apartheid state. But the one thing is, after the 7th, the thing is that I don't care anymore. I'm bad now. Because, here's the thing. After the 7th, I just kind of realized if it's us or them, then it's got to be us. No more them. I never thought I could be a fascist, but I think I'm a fascist now. And it's kind of great because I have all these new friends. Me and Amy Schumer and the ugly guy from Stranger Things.
Matt, where did the idea come from for this sketch? Was it just watching the reaction of quote-unquote liberal Zionists in the wake of October 7th?
A lot of the satire videos I did were that, just watching general reaction from liberal Zionists. That one actually came directly from a conversation that I had with a friend who was pre-October 7th. He had admitted that Israel was an apartheid state. He admitted that there was a form of genocide going on. He admitted that Netanyahu was a war criminal and deserved to be deposed. He admitted all of these things. And then as soon as October 7th happened, he was like, yeah, but we gotta stand behind our country no matter what. And I was like, but you can't how can you justify believing all of these things about Israel and let a guy who you think is already a war criminal be in charge of a war? I just kind of got the feeling that people were generally offended, and this person in particular was generally offended by the idea that, like, all other peoples of the world have gotten to do a genocide. Why can't we do that too? It's kind of anti-Semitic. You won't let us be racist, essentially. And I had my mind blown because I was like, I never thought of it that way, because
the number of people in the pro-Israel camp who have said since October the 7th, but you guys did Dresden. Why can't we do Dresden? And it's like, after Dresden, we came up with the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations, international humanitarian law. A lot of historians have gone back and said the people who did Dresden may have been war criminals. So that's not the best analogy to go for.
Yeah, it's strange too, because you can't pretend to be moral and then decide that it is actually more immoral for you not to let me be immoral than it is to be immoral. It makes no sense whatsoever. And it was just so clear that the liberal Zionists I knew were just activated. They had, in their brain, they just said, well, this is it. Time to forget everything I've learned since growing up with Zionism and being taught that, Arabs are bad. And it just completely undid any progress that I thought, a lot of people I knew were making.
For sure. For me, I often say October 7th was a masks off moment. A lot of masks fell.
Yeah.
Matt, you're talking about liberal Zionists, but really Israel right now, regardless of whatever liberal Zionists think, is run by one of the most fascistic governments in the world, certainly the most right-wing government in Israel's history, and that's saying a lot given the competition they've had from the Sharons and Begins and Shamirs over the decades. Sammy, when you look at a Benjamin Netanyahu figure, as a comedian, what do you do with a Netanyahu?
Well, he's an easy punchline. I think everybody hates him. I mean, there are people who love him. There's people who do speak highly of him. They're not anywhere around here. So
his mom.
Yeah. So
maybe his kid.
Maybe his kid. Oh, I mean, I would hope not even. But yeah. No. He's just a punchline. He's an easy person to just make the most evil person in the world. Clearly he is. He's done all sorts of evil stuff and is really seemingly the most responsible for keeping this going. But at the same time, it also his villainry, if you will, distracts us from the other players in the game, like Biden and the U.S. military-industrial complex and all of the people behind the scenes we don't know anything about who are making calls on this.
Just Sammy, last time you and I spoke, we spoke a lot about the college campus protests, and people were losing their minds about river to the sea, Palestine will be free, Intifada, etc. I remember you had made your Taylor Swift analogy.
I got a lot of heat for that, by the way. I got a lot of hate mail for that one.
Did Taylor get in touch to say that's not what I meant? Shake it off.
No, Taylor liked it, but everybody else not a fan. Yeah.
But on that note, you look at Netanyahu. I think we have the video to play of Netanyahu talking at the UN. Do we have? I think we have the video of, or at least a picture of him holding up the two maps. I don't know if you guys saw the maps that he holds up, which have no Palestine on them, right? Netanyahu, Sammy, is allowed to do river to the sea in its truest genocidal sense.
I believe when he first pulled it out, he pulled it out upside down, which was pretty funny.
He loves to show up to the UN with maps, doesn't he? He always has props. This is the other thing.
He had a famous bomb one that looked like something out of Tom and Jerry. Do you remember that?
That's the cover of my podcast. My podcast logo is him holding that, but instead of a bomb, it's a cherry tomato. Because they have claimed to invent. Israel claims they invented cherry tomatoes, which was a big talking point on my birthright trip. They really wanted us to think that. It's very strange.
I just want to play something else of Netanyahu, because obviously right now we are in the middle of multiple conflicts in the Middle East. You have Israel expanding its war in Lebanon, displacing 1 million people, killing thousands of civilians. No one in the West really gives a shit. And yet you have Benjamin Netanyahu pops up in the middle with little video ads where he tells people how much he loves them before he bombs the shit out of them. And he's done this with Gaza. He's done it with Lebanon. He's now doing it with Iran. And the telltale giveaway is that the subtitles, the language is always in English, which is not what these people speak. But let's have a play.
I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon.
Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population.
Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah.
The IDF is doing its utmost to minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximize them by using Palestinian civilians as human shields.
For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields.
The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones.
Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now.
Get out of harm's way, Matt, says the guy who is sending the harm.
Yeah, he's the harm guy. Get out of my way. He should just say that.
Do you think he has a library of clips for each country that we're just going to see over the unfold? Like he's got a Jordan one,
Oh yeah,
and a Syria one, and an Iraq one.
At this point, it's like it's just Mad Libs. It's just insert country and then insert city that we're about to bomb. Insert
who we can blame everything.
Yeah, insert area in house where bombs are hidden. It's like it's almost rude at this point because not only are you destroying people's lives, but you don't even have the courtesy to write new copy. Just get a writer's room.
Well, on that note, let's play one more quick clip. I think we've got Netanyahu addressing the people of Iran.
I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach.
This guy's voice is annoying. Let's take a break from Netanyahu. I think we've made our point. Sammy, he says it's directly to the people of Iran. He says in English, which is, of course, the language of Iran. This is all for American media consumption, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, that's what Netanyahu is. He's the person who speaks in a way that dumb Americans can think he's on the right side.
Dumb Americans who include, Matt, it seems, the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Netanyahu has run rings around for the last year. We now got the latest version of a piece that I've seen written maybe 700 times since October the 7th, which is Joe Biden's really mad at Benjamin Netanyahu in private.
He's
and he
furious.
says no more. He's furious and he's not going to do it again. And he released an F-bomb about Bibi and he's not going to help him anymore. And he's got a red line, a really red line. And we've seen that like the 88th iteration of that with Lebanon and Iran. And there was a Politico piece recently, Matt, which had Biden saying, apparently he's told aides, he thinks that Netanyahu wants Trump to get elected. Really? Haven't some of us been telling you that for fucking 12 months?
From the beginning, it's been, this is what has contributed to so many people feeling like they're going crazy, is the fact that this has all been clear. From November, it was like, oh, this is clearly Netanyahu's not a guy who's likes Biden, likes Democrats. He is openly a Trump supporter, and people have been saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing anything that this guy wants you to do? Why can't you? You are the president of the United States, are you not? And to which the only answer is, at this point, I don't think Biden knows that. I don't think he knows he's the president anymore. I think at this point, every time he talks about I can't believe Netanyahu, bombed Lebanon when he said he wouldn't. Someone got to do something about this. I'm going to write a letter to the president. Taft, could you do something about this? Someone needs to grab the reins of the government right now because it is clearly no one at the wheel.
Matt, I don't know what's worse. Is it that he's just being fooled by Netanyahu time and again and he's too old out of it to realize? Or is it this is just a bullshit excuse to carry on doing what he wants to do because he's a Zionist to his core and he has to arm Israel and it doesn't matter if he doesn't get along with the Prime Minister of Israel? And I don't know what's worse, to be honest. Is it that he's being fooled or that he's being disingenuous with the rest of us?
Well, the outcome's the same either way, but it is very clear that he is a Zionist to his core, which is not – that's something he has said. he has continually talked about himself as a Zionist, continually talked about himself as Israel's number one ride or die. Yeah. And so, this is not strange.
Biden is no longer a president. He's just a really, really bad comedy MC. He's like, who am I bringing up next? Oh, Mehdi.
with a lot of bloodshed involved. Sammy, you know and I know that if Kamala Harris loses to Donald Trump, a lot of Democrats, a lot of people in the media, a lot of serious people say, well, it's the fault of those Muslims and Arab Americans who didn't get behind her in Michigan. And we're seeing her numbers are cratering in places like Michigan with Arab Americans. There's a poll out from the Arab American Institute last week which suggested that Trump has a marginal lead over Harris with Arab Americans, which is in my view, insanity, but that's where we've got to. I'm not going to ask you, Sammy, if you're one of the Arab Americans who opted for Trump in a poll. I'm assuming you didn't. But they will get blamed. And I just find it so odd because if you need someone to blame for Harris losing, you could just point at Joe Biden. It seems like he's intent on making his VP lose.
Yeah. Yeah, as much as I think about what you just asked, I think that the Democrats are doing it to themselves. They have every ability to either stop this war or clean up their PR mess. I mean, but Biden is hardly acknowledging anything. Kamala, I get it from a strategy standpoint. She wants to avoid talking about this during her election and focus on the, talking points that other people are more responsive to. But just a little bit of acknowledgement that people are getting massacred in Lebanon, that people are getting massacred in Gaza. You don't have to always start it with Israel has the right to defend itself, or we're going to send everything to Israel. Maybe start with Gaza one time. Start with Gaza and then say Israel as the afterthought, or maybe start with Lebanon. Start with Israel as the afterthought.
They didn't even make an afterthought in the statements that Biden and Harris put out on the Nasrallah killing. They didn't even mention the killing of Lebanese civilians. Didn't even get a passing reference from either the president or the vice president. Sammy, you have talked about Republicans, Democrats in your stand-up. You also talked about third party, and I recently had Jill Stein on my weekly show where some people weren't happy because I grilled her a bit. But let's play a clip of you talking about third party voting. I think we have that clip.
I was telling this guy what I was thinking, and he was like, oh, vote for third parties, vote for Trump. I'm like, no, vote for third parties, vote for third party. It sends a signal to the establishment. You're not going to put up with their bullshit. And he's like, you're a brown Arab guy. Don't you know Trump's going to be worse for you? I'm like, don't tell me what's good for me. Especially if you call yourself a progressive. I wouldn't got caught saying that. It's not very progressive at all. If you tell an LGBTQ person what's good for them, it's called pink washing. There's a term for that. If you tell an Arab person that Trump's bad for them, it's called orange washing. So, I came up with that. He's like, well, you're just throwing away your vote. You're basically just a suicide vote. I'm like, don't you fucking say it. You were going to say suicide voter, weren't you? That's offensive. No, I prefer jihadi for democracy.
Can I point out the irony of that joke is that I do a lot of 2004 Little John references. The parallel is this whole situation is really giving 2004 Bush-Iraq war vibes. So that's what that was about.
And of course, to go back a previous election, 2000 was when Ralph Nader was accused of helping Bush beat Gore.
Yes.
We have 2016 where Jill Stein is accused of helping Trump beat Clinton. She's back now, also Cornel West. And look, they do seem appealing to a lot of people because they're basically saying genocide's bad, which neither of the main party candidates are saying. And I get that. And I had Jill Stein on the show with Butch Ware, her running mate. And what they say about Palestine, 100% I agree with it. My issue is she's not going to win, right? So if she's not going to win, how does she stop the genocide? That's my problem. People get mad at me for saying that. But it's like math, right? This is your thing, Sammy. She's on 2%.
Right.
You can't win with 2%.
Right.
And it's a two-party system, whether we like it or not. I'd love if it wasn't, and I hope one day it isn't. But right now, this is where we're stuck with. And that's what frustrates me, and I don't have an answer to the worst choice that we have to make in our lives. But I don't think we should pretend it's not a hard choice, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the higher her percentage is, the bigger of a signal it sends to the establishment. The bigger of the signal it sends to the Democrats, like, hey, you really need to change your policy if you're going to win this base next time around. And yes,
but it's the next time around that worries me, right? In the meantime, we got the orange dude from the orange washing.
It's a risk. Yeah. It's a risk. It's a sacrifice. But it's like, how long do you want to keep playing this game, and how do you want to play the game?
And my worry about it is that the Democrats have this problem with abandoning issues that were issues that the left cares about, only to the detriment of their own party, because they get picked up, like Trump did, picks up a lot of like leftist language and leftist talking points, and does the reactionary right-wing thing, which is you blame whatever material issues are happening due to, labor unions being destroyed and so on and so forth, and you just blame migrants or whatever. What's going to happen if a right-wing populist is the one who decides to pick up the issue of Israel being bad? You think it's going to be, this person is pro-Palestinian? No, we're going to see right-wing anti-Semitism start spreading. And then we really actually do have something to worry about as a community, because the people I see on the streets who are shouting in solidarity with Palestinians, they are not Nazis. They are left-wingers. They are people who care about a genocide, because that is the morally correct thing to do.
But there are a lot of Nazis who have jumped on the bandwagon since October 7th, sadly. I see them on social media, and some people, sadly, without knowing, share their shit.
Of course. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be some sort of leadership from the party that purports to be the representation of people on the left. Or if they can, fumble it completely and leave it open for a right-wing populist. And to me, that is like, if your whole thing is I'm worried about the existence of the Jews, as you claim, not good for right-wing populists to start, picking up this issue and doing the right-wing populist thing, which is not blaming American empire or imperialism or racism or apartheid, and instead blaming the Jewish people in general.
Donald J. Trump has said on the record that if he loses, he's going to blame Jewish people.
That's right.
Pretty brazenly anti-Semitic thing to say.
Yes,
but, hey,
yes, it is.
As long as he doesn't say anything about intifadas on campus, he gets a pass. Guys, we're going to have to leave it there. On that note, thank you both for joining me a year after October the 7th to talk about a little bit about what a crazy year it's been. It has been a fundamentally crazy, sad, brutal, violent, but also insane year, to go back to how Matt and Sammy both started the show. Make sure to like and subscribe to We're Not Kidding wherever you get your podcast. Head over to Zeteo.com to make sure you are subscribed so you can watch all of our output and read all of our stuff whenever you can. Also, some very exciting news to share with you all. We're Not Kidding. This show, this podcast that you've been watching for months, has been nominated for not one, but 2 Signal Awards for excellence in podcasting. So if you want to help us out, go over to vote.signalaward.com to cast your votes before October the 17th. Our 2 categories are Best New Podcast, which is what we are, and Best Live Podcast Recording, which is what we did with Alana Hadid. And we want to do it again soon. So support We're Not Kidding wherever you can. Keep listening to We're Not Kidding. Keep watching We're Not Kidding. Keep tuning in to Matt Lieb's podcast, Bad Hasbro. Tune in to Sammy Obeid, who's on tour all over the world, as he put it earlier, all over the world. Join my 2 guests wherever you see them and find them, because they're bloody hilarious and very wise. And I enjoyed talking to you both. Sammy, Matt, thank you both.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Thanks for having us.
We're Not Kidding is a Zeteo production. I'm your host, Mehdi Hassan, and today's co-hosts were Matt Lieb and Sammy Obeid. Our executive producer is Kieran Alvey. Our senior producer and editor is Frank Capello. Our music was composed by Andy Clausen. Our design is by Alicia Tetone. Our mix engineer is Valentino Rivera. And the title card animation is by Ehsan Mezghali. Special thanks to Stephen Wenzel for help with research.